study in 2 Timothy. If you've got your Bibles, go on and grab them. You can tell who's a regular by the ones who are going to their bags to grab their Bibles. So, we talked about last week how we're in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9 onwards. We talked about last week about how at the end of the letter, it's kind of like the credits. You know, he's really like said his final, like, you know, I've run the race, I've fought the good fight, and like I've made it kind of thing. And then at the end, he kind of does this like, oh, and by the way, say hi to this person and this and this and this. And it's kind of like the credits at the end of a movie, but it's still God's inspired word, and there's still plenty for us to learn from it. So, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9 through to 22. This is Paul writing to his young prodigy Timothy, a young pastor who as he writes this last letter of his life, as he prepares to have his head chopped off. He knows he's about to die, and he wants to encourage this younger pastor with words on how to live the Christian life well, how to be faithful to the end. And this is the last thing he says. Do your best to come to me soon. For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Luke alone is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. Tychicus I have sent to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, also the books, and above all the parchments. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. Beware of him yourself, for he strongly opposed our message. At my first defense, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. May it not be charged against them. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, so that through me the message might fully be proclaimed, and all the Gentiles are just people who are not Jewish, all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory and forever and ever. Amen. Greet Prisca and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. Erastus remained at Corinth, and I left Trophimus, who was ill, at Miletus. Do your best to come before winter. Eubulus sends greetings to you, as does Pudens and Linus and Claudia and all the brothers. The Lord be with your spirit. Grace be with you. One of the things I want us to see here is that this, as Paul writes his final words, what we are actually seeing is a picture of a man who is faithful to the end. A man who is absolutely faithful to the end. Look at verses 9 through 13. Kind of what we see is Paul, you got to consider, he's about to die. He knows he's going to die. He's come to the end of his life, and yet he is still planning, he is still strategizing about how the gospel might reach the Gentiles. How can we get the gospel message, this good news about Jesus Christ, to more and more people? He's still planning and moving the pieces in his head. He's thinking, how do I get the gospel forward? This person needs to go there. This person has gone out there. And he's nearing death, but he plays to the final whistle. You know, if you play sport analogy, if you play sport, you'll know that the referee will start the game at minute 1 and end the game at minute 90, because real sports go for 90 minutes. And some players will, about the 80th minute or 85th minute, will go, oh, I'm gassed. There's only about 5 or 10 minutes left. I'm going to take it easy. Some players are like that. Other players go, no, there's still 5 minutes to go. There's still 3 minutes to go. So I'm going to run my lungs out until the final whistle, because there's still time to make a difference. What we see with Paul is in his, not talking football, but talking about his life and his Christian ministry, even as he awaits death, in just the worst kind of circumstances, if it was us, we would have given up. We'd be cursing God, going, how have I gotten into this stink situation? But even in prison, awaiting death, he's still thinking, how can I grow and learn more about my faith? He's like, bring the books, bring the parchments. And he's still thinking, how do we get the gospel forward? And Paul says in another letter, he says that for him, to live is Christ. It's not even like to live is about Christ, or to live is serving Christ, or it's like for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Why is it gain to die? Because I get to be with Christ. And so he says to live is Christ, and he's a guy that actually means it. And that's the kind of picture of the guy that we see here. And so for us, as we wrap up this 4-month series, the question tonight, I guess, is how do we, well, the question throughout the whole series has been, how do we become someone like this? And in this final message of the series, to be faithful to the end, this is the one point for tonight, to trust God above all else. Trust God above all else. If you could go to the next slide, please, Steph. Look, friends are good. Friends are important, but they're going to come and go. And so our ultimate hope, our ultimate faith, our ultimate trust has to be in God. But I want you, please don't misunderstand me. I'm saying, yeah, God's number one, but what I am not saying, so don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying friends aren't important. I'm not saying Christian friends are insignificant, that we can get rid of them or we can go by without them. That is not what we're saying at all. We're saying that God is ultimately important, and he's the number one in whom we put our faith and trust. But also, we need good Christian friends. Friends are still important. Now, if you think about this passage, like, this is the absolute, when I think about it anyway, this is like the absolute privilege of one's life to, as you think about someone like Paul, and he's writing his last words, and you get a shout out. Can you imagine if your boy won an Oscar or something, and he gets up there at the Academy Awards, I want to thank the Academy, and I want to thank my wife, and da-da-da, and bro gives you a shout out. You'd be like, man, on the world stage, at the Oscars, Joel is giving me a shout out. You'd be like, man, what an honor. But even greater than the Oscars and the Academy Awards is the Apostle Paul and his ministry. And in this passage, he's going to highlight some people. And I think, man, what an absolute privilege. And it represents, I guess, his love towards these people and their significance to him and his ministry. And so we as Christians, if we want to be faithful to the end, we need Christian friends. We need Christian friends. Strong Christian friends. And I want to just highlight very quickly 2 reasons why Christian friends are important. Number one is because Christian friends, they minister to us. Seems obvious, doesn't it? Christian friends minister to each other, and they help us to be faithful, and they help us to persevere. And you read through, whoever wrote it, the letter to the Hebrews, and you're going to see this theme of like, hey, keep hanging out together, keep gathering together, keep meeting each other, and keep persevering, and keep encouraging each other. Keep encouraging each other to persevere. And so God's system that he's arranged is that part of your perseverance, yes, God holds on to you, and God by his Spirit works in you and will hold on to you, but in some way that God understands, he uses the encouragement of fellow Christians to help us get over the line. And so in that letter to the Hebrews, he's like, man, as long as it's called today, like you keep encouraging each other every day. Because life is hard, and life has many distractions. And so if I don't have Zach reminding me about Jesus, I'm prone to wander. And if Zach doesn't have me reminding him about Jesus, he's prone to wander. And so we need Christian friends who are going to minister to each other. And so you look at verse 11. You got someone like Luke. He says Luke is someone that's stuck with him through thick and thin. Not because it's profitable, but he's stuck with him. Luke, verse 11, Luke alone is with me. He's stuck with him because of their shared love for Jesus. You look at verse 19, he mentions greet Prisca and Aquila, or Priscilla and Aquila. In Romans, he mentions these people and says, man, these people risk their lives for me, or risk their necks for me. Why? Because it was profitable? No. Because of a shared love for Jesus Christ. And no doubt for Paul, in a moment where he's by himself, facing death, the encouragement of these people who stuck by me. You know what that's like, right? If you've ever been in the pits and you've come through that and you know your boys or your gals who stuck with you through that time, you know, right? I was in the pits, but Jackson was with me, and I'll remember that till I die. It must have been a great encouragement to him. So friends are important. Christian friends are important because they minister to us. But Christian friends are also important because they give us an opportunity for us to minister to them. You see, the Christian life and Christian friendship isn't just about you minister to me, and I'll take. But actually, no, it's a give and a take. We minister to each other. We need friends in our lives to whom we can give, and that's good for us. Our Christian walk and our encouragement, our life around this concept of encouragement shouldn't just be about receiving all the time, but also giving encouragement and helping each other persevere in the faith and building into other Christians and discipling younger Christians and mentoring others. If you look at these three people that are mentioned here, Titus, Tychicus, Timothy, these are all younger Christians that Paul has been ministering to. So you think about someone like Titus. When Paul needed someone to go pastor on the island of Crete, who did he send? He sent his boy Titus, someone whom he had trained up. Tychicus, as we read in Ephesians and mentioned in Colossians as well, is described as a fellow worker. And he actually bigs him up in Ephesians. He's like, yo, like this guy, he probably was his scribe, and he's the guy that took the letter. And he's like, hey, if you want to find out more about what's going on, talk to my guy Tychicus. He knows what's going on. He's another younger man that he's poured into. And then obviously, Timothy. This is whom he's writing the letter to. These are younger Christians that Paul has. Paul didn't just have like other Christians who are encouraging him, but he's feeding into others as well, mentoring younger men. And so these are younger Christians whom he has built up. And maybe, perhaps, if you have spent time mentoring perhaps they were really annoying at the time and wouldn't learn the lessons that he was trying to teach them. But in the grand scheme of things, even though they cost him a lot of time and a lot of energy, these Christians that Paul has built up, they will eventually go on to reach people that Paul was never going to reach and do things for God that Paul was never going to do, especially now that he's locked up in prison. And so we're talking about, okay, we need Christian friends who are going to minister to us, but we also need Christian friends whom we are going to minister to as well. And this is actually a mandate for every Christian. Like, you tonight, go home and read Paul's letter to Titus. And what you're going to see there is as he gives instructions to people, and one of the instructions he gives the main instruction that he gives older Christians, plural, is go mentor younger Christians. So, I want to beg the question and ask the question, okay, who are the Christians that I am building into? Paul had his Timothys, he had his Tituses. Who are the young Christians that I'm mentoring? And you might go, oh, but I'm 15 years old. Are you 15? I'm 15 years old. What have I got to give? Plenty. Parents, our children are our number one focus of discipleship, right? So we can't neglect that. If you don't have kids, that's okay. Consider who are the people that I can build into. And so we don't just take. There's a call on Christians to go make disciples and teach people about Jesus. And what that's going to do, how we're talking about, okay, how is that going to help me be faithful to the end? Well, actually, now you're accountable. You're accountable. One of the biggest lessons I've learned becoming a dad is that I can't be lazy about anything anymore because I am accountable to my kids, right? So if I start going, oh man, I don't want to pray and read my Bible, then they're going to see that. I'm now accountable to my kids. And so there's a sense in which, okay, there's younger people that are looking up to me that I'm building into. That's keeping me accountable to keep running fast for God, running strong and hard for God. Does that make sense? So as we have younger people in our lives that we're supposed to be building into, even when it's tough, we go, oh man, I don't want to be at church tonight, but I know my small group is going to be there, and so I'm accountable. Like I need to be a good role model. So it helps us to kind of be faithful even when it's hard. So the question is, do we have younger Christians to whom we're ministering? And I guess even broader than that is this question. Am I availing myself to have Christian friendships? Whether it's a peer-to-peer Christian friendship, or whether it's an older person whom I'm seeking wisdom from, or a younger person to whom I can share my wisdom. Am I availing myself to have Christian friendships? We live in the time of life in the world history, where it's like the loneliest we have ever been. Everyone, we're all connected by our phones, and probably why we're all so lonely. And yet, what we'll do is we'll come to church feeling lonely, but then zip out as fast as humanly possible. And I get it, like maybe you have a family dinner to get to or whatever, so I'm not throwing shade on anyone for leaving church. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, are we availing ourselves to be in situations where we can build friendships? And it takes a long time, and it's hard, but it's so necessary and important. And so you think about, okay, hey, so the young adults, we've got a movie night coming up. I hate watching movies. I love watching movies. I'm painting a hypothetical picture. I hate watching movies, but you know what? Why don't you go along? Go along and watch some dumb movie about a rat in a kitchen or something. Not because of the great cinematography and acting, but just to get around people, and maybe you might build some friends. We got the midwinter Christmas coming up, and it's like, okay, there's going to be little ones, older ones. You might not know anyone that's going, but why not go and see who you sit next to? And maybe you might meet a mentor or sit next to a 12-year-old girl whom you can, now I'm not saying you're 12, you're 15, but you can input into a 12-year-old's life. Come to the morning service, just are we availing ourselves to be around people so that opportunities, I'm not saying it's just going to happen like that, but opportunities to build Christian friendships. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes now. Can you please stand? We're going to come out of our seats, spend time saying hi to each other, because we want to make sure church is a place where friendships can happen and everyone is greeted and no one feels lonely. So please come on out of your seats. You can sign up for dinner, and then in 10 minutes, I'll be back. We've just talked about how, yes, Christian friends are important and they're so necessary in our lives, and we want to avail ourselves to be in spaces where we can have Christian friends. The next bit I want to talk about is the fact that the reality is, as important as Christian friends are, friends will come and go. People will come and go in our lives. And so humans are humans, and humans can only do so much. They will come and go, and the sad reality is, perhaps they might even betray us. So you look at verse 10, It's talking about Crescens and Titus. These two guys, they haven't betrayed Paul, but they have missionary jobs elsewhere. The point is, they have had to go. We're going to have friends in our lives who are going to come and we're going to be strengthened by, and we're going to minister to them, and it's going to be great. But for no fault of their own or whatever, just life, ministry assignments, and so on, they're going to go. So these friends have come into Paul's life, and now they have gone from Paul's life. But then you look at verse 10, also in verse 10, talking about Demas. Now, Demas was one of Paul's boys. If you read, I think it's Philemon, it's going to mention him and say that he was a fellow worker. So he wasn't just like somebody that he used to know, but he's actually like, he was one of his fellow workers. But his heart drifted. Listen to what it says about him. Demas is like, hey, Timothy, can you do your best to come to me soon? For Demas, in love with this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. His heart has drifted. I don't know why. I don't know if this is a case of some big opportunity to make money has come up, or he was tempted away by some other thing, or he just decided, actually following Jesus isn't lucrative enough for me, so I'm not going to do that anymore. I don't know what it was, but it says here, in love with this present world, has deserted me. Like he's ditched him. This is not a case of, life just happened and, we'll catch up sometime, and then 4 years later you haven't caught up. It's not like that. He actively deserted him. He ditched him. He stitched him up. And that's the sad reality of life. You see, the people that we're running hard for Jesus with right now, when we get to the finish line, when we cross the finish line, these people that we're running with now may not be the people who are there at the finish line with us. There's no guarantee that they will be there. Sometimes friends will come and go, and sometimes they will betray us. Sometimes we will betray them. And it's a pretty stink situation, and I wish it didn't have to be so bad, but that's just how things go. And that's why it's so important for us as Christians, particularly those of you who are younger, it's so important to set firm foundations on God and His Word, and have God as our ultimate source of hope, and build those strong foundations now, so that when a friend in the faith decides to betray us or stitch us up or whatever it might be, actually our roots are in God, and those foundations have been set. You look in verse 11, he mentions Mark. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me for ministry. So Mark was a guy who went along with Paul and Barnabas on a missionary journey, but then he ditched them. He ditched them, and that caused a whole bunch of problems. You can read about this in Acts. And so Barnabas was like, let's give him a second chance. And Paul was like, let's not give him a second chance. And so because of Mark, even Paul and Barnabas, they decided, this isn't going to work out. So Mark ditched these guys on a missionary journey, and it really stitched people up. Now, obviously, from this text, we can deduce that Paul and Mark reconciled. He says, get Mark and bring him with you. He's very useful to me for ministry. So they made up, so that's great. Happy ending. But the point is, there was a time when Mark ditched them. Again, it's just another example of Christian friends. Even Christian friends can betray us, and we might betray our Christian friends. It happens. And you look at verse 16. At my first defense, so his trial, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. Paul is on trial, and no one showed up for him. Everyone ditched him. Can you just imagine the absolute backstabbing that Paul must have felt? Like, he has risked his life. He's putting his neck on the line, literally, to come minister to these Roman Christians. And when the going gets tough, and he's on trial for trying to help and minister to these people like, nah, not worth it. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they forgot that the trial was on. I don't know. But the point is, at my first defense, no one came to stand by me. Friends come and go. Friends can even betray us. And that's why it is so important that our ultimate hope and faith and trust is in God. Because he doesn't come and go. He's with us always. Look at verses 17 through 18. He says, they all deserted me, but the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, so that through me the message might fully be proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. To him be glory forever and ever. Amen. So Paul, he trusts God. He trusts God above all else, and that's why he's able to actually move past that hurt. You see, if you and I were in prison because of our faith, and particularly, like let's say you get an invitation, well, not even an invitation. You go to, what's your favorite country, bro? Fiji. You get an invitation, you go to Fiji, and you want to minister to the people of Fiji, and you're sharing the gospel with them, and then you get locked up, and then they all ditch you. How would you be feeling? You'd be like, I hate Fijians, I hate this country, God, how could you let this happen to me, blah, 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 right? Let's be honest, we would be like that. I would be like that. But Paul, he doesn't hold it against them. He literally says, they all deserted me, but may it not be charged against them. Because he's got the right perspective. He doesn't have false ideas about what people are like. He knows that his ultimate hope, his ultimate faith, his ultimate trust has to be in God alone. So he understands what people is like. He gets it. He's stitched up. Human friends, they're going to come and go. But he understands there is a friend who will never let him down. All his friends have either ditched him or have ministry responsibility elsewhere. And he's asking Timothy, hey, can you come and make it by winter? But maybe Timothy's not going to make it by winter. Maybe he's not going to be able to come, right? Luke is there with him, but Luke can't go and die with him. He can't cross that final line with him. So he's utterly, in a human sense, utterly alone, but he knows that God is with him. He knows that God is with him. No one showed up for his trial, but the Lord stood by me. No human came and stood by me, but the Lord stood by me. God is always with us. No doubt he was scared. He must have been freaked out. You know, we read about all the things that Paul went through, and you go, man, what a hero. What an absolute legend. But he's also just a human being. He's just a man. You know? Hey, so one of the things I love doing is I love war movies. I don't love war. I love war movies. And I'll watch war movies, and probably most of the guys in the room can relate to this. So just 50% of the people don't listen. I'll watch a war movie, and someone will be like a coward and let their friends die or something, and you'll be they're watching it, and they're yelling at the TV, how dare you do that? Why would you not get up and fight for your friends and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, if we were in the war, we would be the same, right? You know, we talk a big game about, I'd be killing all the Nazis and stuff. No, you wouldn't. You'd be around the corner hiding in the back, letting your friends do the fighting. We'd all be cowards, right? We would all be like that. Paul, we think, is this great hero, but he's just a human. No doubt he is the prospect of his life coming to an end. And no doubt he would be feeling scared and fearful and worried about what might happen. But he says, the Lord strengthened me. When we're weak, God will strengthen us. Now, that might be through some supernatural, physical, he's going to give me the strength to be able to go do something. Or he's going to, by his Spirit, remind us of the truths about who he is and and his word and give us the motivation or I guess the kind of boldness to do whatever task he has called us to do. God, by his Spirit, will strengthen us so that we can obey. And in this case, it's going to be like to be faithful to the end, to preach the message to the Gentiles. He is the one who will always be there. God is the one who's always going to be there to stand by him and strengthen him and to encourage him. And the last thing you see here is that Paul is sentenced to death, but the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed. Not physically, because what happened next? Not a trick question. What happened next? Joel, what happened next? That happened, yep. That happened to his head. That happened. So it's not like God magically stopped his head from falling off. It's not talking about physical when he says, the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed. Not physically, but, read the next line, but he will bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. The boldness that Paul had came from knowing that God, through his Son Jesus Christ, is the one who rescues us from our sin and the wrath of God that sin deserves. Do you understand that? God's not going to rescue us from every physically difficult situation we might get into, but we can have boldness in our Christian life knowing that God will rescue us from the penalty of our sin and the wrath of God that sin deserves. And so, why does that bring us boldness? Because we know, I'm in. I'm all good. Like, Christian life is hard, and I suck at it most of the time, but it's all good. My sins, not in part, but the whole, all of it, God has dealt with. Past, present, future. And so it's like, oh man, I sinned again today. All right, repent, get up, carry on. Or you might feel like you're in a really sticky situation and you're about to get your head chopped off. Boldness can come from this truth, knowing you can chop my head off, bro, but I know where I'm going. And I know that God is going to let me into his kingdom. And I know God is going to, people are going to get what they're going to get. And so I can entrust that to God. And even in the scariest of times, I can be bold. And so as great as people are, and as wonderful as people are, and our friends around us, as wonderful as they are, God alone is the one to whom we have to give our ultimate faith, our ultimate trust, and our ultimate belief, because he's the one that's going to always stand by us. He's the one that's going to strengthen us, and he is the one that ultimately saves us. So our ultimate trust is in him. So what does that mean? What does it mean to put our ultimate trust in God? Because that sounds good, right? Good catchphrase. Put your ultimate trust in God. Let me do my best to explain in simple terms what it means or what it might look like for us to put our ultimate hope and faith and trust in God. We've talked about before how life is lived in moments. We go from one moment to the next moment. Right now, you are sitting here listening, studiously taking notes. Or asleep or on your phone. You're in that moment right now. And then after this moment is the next moment where we sing some songs or do this or that or whatever. Life is lived in moments. And what I think it means to ultimately put our ultimate trust in God is in every single moment deciding, I'm going to choose God. I'm going to choose to obey God in this moment, and I'm going to choose to obey God in this moment. And when I get to this moment, Livy might be saying, hey, you should do this, but God is saying you should do this. Then I'm going, okay, what it means to put my ultimate trust in God as opposed to my friends is I'm going to do what God says, choosing God moment by moment. And this journey, this lifetime of of putting our trust in God and obeying God moment by moment, it begins with water baptism. You see, water baptism is this thing where, it identifies us publicly with Jesus Christ. It's symbolic of, like, I'm now part of the church. It's symbolic of a new beginning into something. It's symbolic of sins being washed away. It's symbolic of our union with Christ, that his death is our death and his resurrection is our resurrection. But ultimately, even if you didn't know any of that, perhaps the number one thing what water baptism is about is obedience to Jesus Christ. And so if these three girls who are getting baptized tonight, they know all of that. We sat down and did a class and talked through all of that. But even if we didn't do all of that, all they needed to know as it pertains to why they are getting baptized tonight, it could have been because Jesus says so. And that's, if you say he's your Lord, then that should be enough. And and really, I guess it is enough. So tonight, when we see Maddie and Aaron and Livy get baptized, what they are saying through that action is that they understand that they are sinners, that they have rebelled against God, and that they have sin that needs paying for, which they themselves cannot do. They're not saying, I'm a Christian who is better than all of you, like, look how holy I am. They're saying, no, look how unholy I am, look how in need of Jesus I am, and therefore I've put my trust in him, that he would save me. And now that he saved me, he's my Lord, and I'm going to obey whatever he says. And the first thing he says, okay, go get baptized. That's what water baptism is about.